Hey, this is Antonio. Welcome back to my channel. Who's ready for some fighting words? In this video, I want to do something totally different, something that I haven't done before, but something that I have been itching to do, and something that I've been asked about several times. So I figured, you know what? Why not now? In this video, we are going to have the first of many mythical matchups. And what better or who better to start the mythical matchups with other than Iron Mike Tyson and the greatest of all time, Muhammad Ali. So without further ado, you know what we do. Let's just jump on into it. Let's see. First, I think we need to start from the beginning. So let's just start from the beginning. So when I look at these two, both of these guys have had two careers in one. So, well, kind of like three actually, but we're only going to focus on the first half of their career. Because the reality is, both these guys actually share something in common other than being, heavyweight champions of the world. They both were in exile for 3 years. They both stepped away from the fight game for 3 years. Mike Tyson was actually behind bars, facing, he did his time. And Muhammad Ali, he fought the system. So they both actually, stepped away. When they came back, neither one of them were what they were when they stepped away. They were shells of themselves. However, Ali had a much stronger and better run when he came back than Tyson did. So because of that, I don't think that's fair. I really don't think that's fair. I think Ali had a better run. I think Ali was still finding ways to win, and he didn't have his legs or anything like that anymore. But he had his intelligence and he knew how to fight. And he knew he could dig deep when he needed to. Mike Tyson, I don't feel like he progressed any when he came out. The Catskill connection was completely shattered. Customato passed away. Kevin Rooney was no longer around him. So again, I just don't think it's fair if I look at the second half of their careers, because quite frankly, I believe if that were the case, I really wouldn't need to do a video on this because Ali would clearly blow Mike out the water. So we have to go back. We have to go back to the beginning. And in order for me to go back to the beginning, I'm going to have to apologize to everybody early because I'm going to have to say what his name was. His name originally was Cassius Clay. So we need to go back to those days. We need to go back to the Louisville Lip. We need to go back to those days and look at that Ali. That's what we need to look at. And that's the Ali that I'll be focusing on because I think it's a much better representation, and I think it's fair. We're talking about both of these guys when they're in their prime. So we're going to have to look at that guy, the guy that beat Sonny Liston, that guy. And for Mike Tyson, we're going to have to look at not Iron Mike Tyson, but Kid Dynamite. We're going to have to focus on that guy. That guy was a demolisher. That guy was a destroyer. That guy was literally just conquering villages. So we're going to have to look at that guy. Now, that being said, let's take a look at the two. When I look at these two, the first thing that comes to mind is confidence. And they both expressed confidence. But I think Ali naturally had confidence. Now, again, I'm going to have to go back to their origin stories of why they got into boxing. So Mike Tyson was a troubled kid, in and out of reform schools and juvenile detention centers and things like that. And he ends up, going into like a kind of like a boxing program. Basically, one of the guards was training the kids, and it was more or less for the kids just to get their aggression out. Mike Tyson he basically impressed the guard, and the guard brought him to Catskill, New York, where he meets Customato, and the legend begins from there. That's basically what happened. And Customato has to build Mike up. He not only has to build him as a fighter, but he also has to build him mentally. Because what he finds is Mike isn't very strong right here. He's kind of, fragile right there. So he's going to have to build him up. Now, there are many interviews of Mike contesting to what I just said, that he wasn't the strongest mentally. And Customato had to build him up. Customato had to tell him that he's great and he's beautiful and he's all these things. And after a while, he starts to believe it. on top of that, he starts to believe it with wins. He starts winning. So you winning and you're hearing that you're great and you're actually doing great things in the ring. So it's not that hard to believe anymore. So that's how he builds his confidence. Now let's go to Muhammad Ali, or should I say Cassius Clay. Well, totally different scenario. Basically, his bike gets stolen. He's a young kid. I think he's like 11 or something. But he's a young kid and somebody steals his bike. So he's just hollering about how he's going to whoop somebody. In which case, basically somebody's like, listen, do you know how to fight? If you don't know how to fight, how are you going to whoop anybody? And that's how he gets started in the gym. Now, what's the difference between the two? Well, the difference is this: confidence. Young Cassius Clay believed he could whip people before he could actually whip people. Angelo Dundee, nobody had to build him up like to say like, you could do this. He already had that in him. You take Mike Tyson, he needed to be built up. So from their youth, one had that naturally. One was formed into that. He was molded into that. And that confidence is going to plague Mike in this breakdown, to be honest with you. So now that we've already established who's the more confident, and when I'm saying who's the more confident, we can also look into their careers. You're talking about young Cassius Clay calling out Sonny Liston, the guy who's literally killing everybody. That's who he's calling out. The guy who also worked for the mob, beat people up for the mob. That's who young Cassius Clay is calling out. He's calling him a bum. That's who young Cassius Clay is calling out. With a bullhorn, going to the man's house. That's who young Cassius Clay is calling out. So, yeah, confidence, he didn't lack 1 ounce of that. He had a full amount of confidence, hands down. Now, okay, why is that confidence going to plague Mike Tyson? Well, I'll tell you why. Because his confidence, he showed it in everything he did. He would say it out loud and he would go out and he would perform that. He would also call the rounds. He would predict the rounds. Now, if you're going to say things like that, you better be ready to back it up. If you're going to say things like that, people are actually going to expect to see what you just spoken. And he would back it up. I think, psychologically speaking, Cassius Clay would run circles around Kid Dynamite. Psychologically speaking, he would run he would run laps around Kid Dynamite. Kid Dynamite wasn't the most vocal person in the world. He couldn't put it together the way Iron Mike could put it together. Iron Mike had a lot more confidence in himself at that time. I mean, he'd been in so much trouble with the law and, he won world titles. So he was just free to say whatever he wanted. Then he understood how marketing actually worked. Then he understood how, being the villain actually worked. He understands that the more of a villain that I am, the more marketing dollars that come flowing in, and people want to see me destroy things. So he grows into that. Young Cassius Clay is like out the gate, that's just who he is. Young Cassius Clay from the beginning, that's literally who he is. I don't think Kid Dynamite could take the verbal assault of young Cassius Clay. I really don't. And how do I know this? Well, I don't think Mike Tyson had half the criminal background as Sonny Liston, or half the reputation as Sonny Liston. And Sonny Liston couldn't handle young Cassius Clay. Period. He couldn't handle him. He couldn't handle him physically, and we'll get into that. But we couldn't handle him physically, but he couldn't handle him mentally. He couldn't take the mental nonstop verbal assault this kid was just giving to him every chance he got. And it wasn't just at press conferences. He went to the man's house. He would literally go to the man's gym while he was training. He just wouldn't stop. It was literally an all-out verbal assault. Like he was dropping bombs on this guy. And Sonny Liston didn't know how to handle it. And Sonny Liston, in terms of personality, especially in the beginning of his career, is really similar to Kid Dynamite, young Mike Tyson. So when I look at that, I see that comparison just between Liston and Tyson. I can also see what young Cassius Clay would do to Mike Tyson. I really do. And you got to understand, Liston was older. He was a lot older. And he still couldn't handle the verbal assault. He couldn't take the insults, the jokes. He couldn't take that this kid was young and he was good looking and, he had a nice amateur record. He was an Olympian. He was all these things. And he was talking like he literally talked his trash and didn't care. Didn't care. Wasn't afraid of who Sonny Liston's circle was. Didn't care about Sonny Liston's record. Didn't care about Sonny Liston's abilities or his criminal record. He didn't care about none of that. He didn't care about his affiliations with the mob. He didn't care about any of that. None of that. None of that fazed him because he knew once I get you in the ring, it's just you and it's me. My skills matching up against your skills. And again, I believe Sonny Liston was broken before he got in that ring. Now, Sonny Liston was older than Kid Dynamite. That's number one. Number two, I think in terms of skills, Sonny Liston would be a handful for Mike Tyson. Would be a real handful. And I don't know if he could pass that test of Sonny Liston. And I will get into that breakdown another time. But right now, I don't know. Sonny Liston had a lot of experience as well. But he couldn't handle this kid who could, these combinations, the speed, the footwork. Ali did a lot of things for boxing. One of the things he did was he did change the game. If you look, I always say that Roy Jones was like the next level of Ali, just in terms of footwork. The things he was doing, nobody else was doing, and it messed the game up because they just didn't know how to handle it. Now, now that we've gotten past the psychological part, because I truly believe just young Kid Dynamite is not going to be able to take that. I just don't think he can take the nonstop verbal assault. Because again, Cassius Clay is not just going to stop at the press conference. He's going to follow you home. He's going to go to where you're having dinner. He's going to go to where you're training. It's not going to stop. Not until you're in the ring in the night of the scheduled bout. It's not going to stop. And after he wins, and he more than likely will, after he wins, he's going to talk some more. So it's not going to stop. Now, let's just get into the physicality. Let's get into the actual combat. When you look at a young Ali, Cassius Clay, just saying the both names because I don't want to offend anybody or anything like that. I see somebody with extremely fast hands. I see somebody who can not only look steps ahead, but can project things. I see somebody with an amazing jab. I see somebody with a consistent jab. I see somebody who knows how to fight backing up. And again, that was another game changer. I feel like he really elevated in the sport of boxing, just backing up while throwing full-on combinations. I think young Cassius Clay has all the tools and the attributes to beat Kid Dynamite. I really do. Kid Dynamite only knows how to go forward. Kid Dynamite's a lot shorter. Kid Dynamite will be bobbing and weaving in the head movement. And yeah, I think initially that's going to give young Cassius Clay some issues. But I think by round 5 or 6, that issue is going to be a dead issue. I think he's going to get his timing. And number one, let me just say it like this. I think young Cassius Clay is a lot faster than Kid Dynamite. And Kid Dynamite was fast. But I think young Cassius Clay is a lot faster. So it's still going to run its course. I say by round 5 or 6. Another thing is, I forgot to mention, going on a little too long about the psychology, I forgot to mention, he was, back then, they were doing 15 rounds. Tyson's doing, so how many rounds do we give this fight? How many rounds do we give it? I think it plays in young Cassius Clay's favor if he does the 15. But to make it fair, since, Tyson had never done 15 professionally, he probably have, in sparring, but not professionally, we're just going to cut it to 12. But let's just get back to this. Tyson only knows how to go forward. Well, young Cassius Clay can back up and do a full-on assault, but he can also stop and go forward. And that's one of the things that I've always admired about his ability in the ring, where he can literally just be backing up and firing shots and then stop and literally just take off and go straight forward. Again, he just did things that people weren't doing. And the thing about why that's important is because when somebody's backing up, you can kind of get their cadence. But if they just decide to abruptly stop and decide to fight you, it's going to be a problem. So that's one thing there. But there's another thing. There's another aspect. What are we banking on when we look at Kid Dynamite? We're talking about power. That's what we're banking on. We're talking about power. We're talking about a body assault. That's what we're talking about. Well, only problem with that is we know that Ali can take punishment. Now, maybe that was just his latter half that was so durable and strong. Could have been. But I believe that he was a lot stronger in his prime, which would make more sense. I believe he was a lot stronger when he was younger, which would make more sense. Now, yeah, you come into your grown man strength and all that, and I do get that. But obviously, if you take 3 years off and don't do anything, and then you fight Joe Frazier, and Joe Frazier is going to town on your body and your ribs, and you can take that, that's impressive. So what am I saying? I believe he could have still taken that abuse and that punishment when he was younger. That's in him. That's in his mental. Yes, it's a physical thing, but it's also a mental thing. It's a mental thing to be able to take such punishment. And it would be punishment. And it would definitely be punishment. Now, do I think Tyson hits harder than Joe Frazier? Yeah, I definitely think that Tyson hit harder than Joe Frazier. But Joe Frazier, coupled with his, and he did hit hard, with his hatred and anger toward Ali and his want to destroy him, like literally kill him in the ring, I don't know. Maybe it'd be even with his punching power, Joe Frazier and Tyson. I don't know. It would depend on, but you know what? So it still goes back to psychology. This whole thing goes back to psychology because it depends on how pissed off is young Cassius Clay going to make young Mike Tyson. I don't know. What I do know is this. What does he always make fun of? He makes fun of how you look. He makes fun of how you talk. He makes fun of, what are you doing for your community? Whatever it is, he'll find it and he'll jab at it. Now, there's a few things when you look at, Mike Tyson and you look at young Cassius Clay. He's going to be like, well, I'm better looking than you, because he said it to every other guy, so why wouldn't he say it to Mike Tyson? He's definitely going to say it to Mike Tyson. I'm better looking than you. Check. I got to be smarter than you. Check. Right? He's going to go there as well. He's going to look at, Tyson in and out of jail. I got to be smarter than you. But more importantly, Tyson's going to open his mouth at some point, and he's going to hear that lisp. He's going to hear that voice, and it's just not going to be nice for Mike Tyson. And he said that he was bullied and made fun of when he was younger over those little things. Now imagine somebody with the charisma, the creativity, the enthusiasm, and somebody who can draw attention to himself and command a room like a young Cassius Clay with all that material on you. I just don't think young Kid Dynamite can take that. I don't think he can take that. I think he's beaten before he gets to the ring. I think he's already beaten. I think by the time he gets in that ring, he's beaten. Because you could have Ali telling him, listen, you suck and you're this and you're that and I'm better than you. I think he's already beaten. That's what I think. I think he's already beaten. Not to mention, I feel like who has more weapons? Honestly, I actually think that young Cassius Clay had more weapons than Kid Dynamite. Kid Dynamite had hooks, and he had a great jab. He had great lateral movement, but his footwork in comparison to Cassius Clay, I'm sorry, Cassius Clay had much better footwork, and he was much faster with his feet, and he was much lighter on his feet. He could float away, so I don't see him catching young Cassius Clay. I really don't see him catching. I don't see him catching him. But let's just say he were to be able to cut off the ring, because he was good at cutting off the ring. Let's just say he was. I think young Cassius Clay is strong enough and durable enough and mentally strong enough to get through those rounds and get through those difficult moments. I don't think the same for Kid Dynamite. I don't think the same for him. I don't think he can deal with those difficult moments. We saw as he got older, Mike didn't know what to do when he backed up. He didn't know what to do when somebody could back him up. He didn't know what to do when somebody would physically manhandle him. Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield. He didn't know what to do when people would manhandle him and to kind of physically just push him around. Well, we know that was a large part of Ali's game. Well, young Cassius Clay. We know that Lennox Lewis basically beat Tyson with a jab. Now, granted, Iron Mike is not the same fighter as Kid Dynamite, but I strongly believe Lennox Lewis, it doesn't matter at what age they fight, Lennox Lewis is beating Mike Tyson, period. And that jab is going to be a huge defining factor in that fight when he destroys Mike Tyson. At any age, I don't care if it's 20, 25, 30, 35, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. He still beats Mike Tyson. Doesn't matter. I think Mike might be able to put him down if he's younger, but Lennox was pretty strong. He would get back up. And that's the thing about young Cassius Clay. And yeah, he got put down. He got put down by Quarry. He got put down by people. He got put down by Joe Frazier. He got put down by people. And he jumped right back up. He jumped right back up. And that hook from Joe Frazier is probably one of the hardest hooks I've ever seen thrown. And he jumped right back up. There was no hesitation. He didn't have a moment of wobbledness or anything like that. He jumped right back up. Now, you take that same scenario. Yeah, can Mike put him down? Yeah, he could put him down. He could definitely put him down, probably. And there might even be a moment where he catches him. Maybe. Because physically they are built differently. Mike built like a tank, and he's really lean. He was very lean. So, yeah, maybe he could put him down. But again, that comes to, could he catch young Cassius Clay? Could he catch him? And if he could catch him, could he keep him in that space? Could he keep him in that place? Could he trap him in a corner? Could he trap him on the ropes? Could he keep him there long? No, I don't believe so. For two reasons. One, he probably hit him once, but you're not going to really follow that up too many times. He's going to be out of there. But two, Ali just naturally had a thing to fight back. Everybody remembers float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. But look at his latter fights. He knows how to fight. Sonny Liston put something in the man's eye, and Sonny Liston couldn't catch him, even though he cheated, and he still couldn't catch him. He still couldn't catch him. Now imagine if there's nothing in his eye, you're not going to be able to catch him. So that's another thing. You're just not going to be able to catch the guy. But let's just say you do catch him. Let's say you are to put him in a corner. Let's just say you are to trap him momentarily. What happens? I think Ali could manhandle Mike Tyson. I think he could physically maneuver Mike Tyson. That's what I think. I think he could physically just maneuver him around. I think he could have his way with him if they were to get into a wrestling match. And he had to put his underhooks in and kind of get himself or force him off of him so he can get out of the corner. That's what I think. And again, Mike doesn't do too well fighting back. So I think not only would he be able to manhandle him, I think he would fight him off once he manhandles him. And I think that messes up Mike even more, psychologically speaking, because, all right, I can't catch this dude. And when we do get into some kind of an entanglement, I don't get the better of that. He's stronger than I thought. That's another thing. So I just don't see any way. I just don't see any way. I think Ali or young Cassius Clay jabs Mike to pieces, and then probably by like round 6, because I've always said, and I know a lot of you gonna get me for this, but I've always said that Mike Tyson was like a front runner. He's good for a few rounds, but his power has always been his saving grace, because he can still clip you late, but he is like Azab Judah. They're only good for 4 or 5 rounds, and then they kind of, they veer off. All the steam calms down tremendously after round 5, round 6. Or, so then you have Ali who's still going strong, like it's round 1. And I just don't see young kid Dynamite doing anything to stop that. I really don't see him doing anything that could stop that. I don't think you could cut the ring off, because I've already said Sonny Liston put something in the man's eye and he still couldn't get his hands on him. He still couldn't cut the ring off. And when he did, young Cassius Clay just knew how to get out of it. He knew how to move his feet. But he also could take a punch. And he also could maneuver if he had to physically wrestle, he could do that as well. What are you going to do with that guy? But there's nothing in his eyes. Doesn't matter. He can fight backing up. You can't. So, doesn't really matter. He can do just as much damage to you backing up as he can do going forward. And you don't know when he's going to stop and decide to go forward. You don't know. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts. I really just think that there's no way young kid Dynamite drops the dynamite on young Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali. I think without a doubt, Muhammad Ali would have a field day with Mike Tyson in any stage of his career, whether it be Kid Dynamite, whether it be Iron Mike, or whether it be the baddest man on the planet. I don't care which era you want to put of Mike Tyson. I think Muhammad Ali would literally have his way with him. I think he would have his way with him psychologically. I think he would have his way with him physically. And I think he would just dominate him in every aspect of the game. I think if they wanted to have an all-out brawl, I actually think, especially an older Ali, would wipe the floor with Mike Tyson. Don't be caught up on his looks, and don't be caught up on the way he would prefer to fight. Look at what he will do if he's forced to fight. And it's kind of like Sugar Ray Leonard. People get caught up on how the guy looked, and he had the smile and all these things. But if he had to, he had a dog inside that he could always lean back on and rely on. And Ali had the same thing. I just don't think on any level Mike Tyson can handle that. I don't think he could handle Muhammad Ali. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts. Who do I think would beat who in this mythical matchup? I think Muhammad Ali / young Cassius Clay would undoubtedly beat Mike Tyson, young Kid Dynamite. Drop your thoughts down below. I know you're going to have a lot, so drop your thoughts down below. I love to hear them. And without any further ado, please like, please share, please subscribe to my channel.